Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana was in a hearing in the United States Senate, and the conversation came up where he had the Deputy Secretary of the FBI, I believe his last name is Abate. What a great name, right? He abates things. The Deputy Secretary was there, and I think the Deputy Secretary wasn't expecting John Kennedy to go in the direction in which he did. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because you would think that John Kennedy's questions would only be about what is happening with respect to the investigation of the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. And while Senator John Kennedy started out that way, he eventually went in a completely different direction about Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, which we will talk about also in a minute. But first up, here's Senator John Kennedy interviewing and cross-examining, better term, Deputy Secretary Abate of the FBI, who, by the way, is there instead of Christopher Wray, because Christopher Wray just embarrassed himself in front of the committee in the House and said, well, maybe Donald Trump was actually injured by shrapnel from the teleprompter rather than a bullet. And this is like, out of all of the information that he could have provided about the assassination attempt, this is what Christopher Wray decided to focus on. We all know why, of course. So Senator John Kennedy decided to put that to rest with Deputy Secretary Abate because Christopher Wray, of course, didn't have the guts to show up because he had already been humiliated because he humiliated himself. So we have a clip from that, and here it is.
Mr. Abate, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
You are the Deputy Director of the FBI, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is there any doubt in your mind or in the collective mind of the FBI that President Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet fired by the assassin crooks?
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay.
I've been part of this investigation since the very beginning, and that has never been raised.
You're sure?
Yes.
It wasn't a space laser.
No.
It wasn't a murder hornet.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't Sasquatch.
No, Senator.
It was a bullet.
It wasn't a murder hornet. Wasn't that great? Wasn't a space laser, like Austin Powers. Space laser. So, folks, Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, actually said a few days ago and testified in Congress that there were, quote, some questions about whether Trump was hit by a bullet or shrapnel. Now, imagine that you have a president almost killed by a bullet, and you have the perpetrator, the gunman, on top of a building that everybody knows you should have checked and should have covered. And of course, the Secret Service did not do so. Rather than the FBI maybe talking about that, rather than Christopher Wray providing more context as to how such a thing could ever happen, rather than talking about that, he talked about how, well, probably really wasn't the bullet, it was something else, so it wasn't really that bad, was the implication of Wray's testimony, which is why John Kennedy, whom you just heard, the senator from Louisiana, just roasted the Deputy Secretary, whose last name is Abate, because Christopher Wray wouldn't even show up because he realized what an idiot he was and what his testimony was, which was completely trying to play down an assassination attempt. So Kennedy, in the same conversation of Deputy Secretary Abate, asked another question and went into a completely different direction, which I don't think Abate was expecting at all. I think Abate was there, as was the current director of the Secret Service. They were both there in front of the committee to talk about the assassination attempt. But John Kennedy initially asked the question about, was it a bullet or was it shrapnel or a laser or a murder hornet? And then talked about, guess what? Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. Remember, these are the two individuals who worked for the FBI during the last election and did everything they could to undermine, as FBI employees, Donald Trump from getting elected. As a result of their texts to one another, and God knows what other communication that they had, they were also apparently lovers. As a result of all this information that came out about these two individuals, they were fired. Well, fast forward to today, and Lisa Page and Peter Strzok now are supposed to be receiving something like $2 million in a settlement from the federal government. Now, keep in mind, if you sued the federal government, someone has to sign off in a settlement. That means a settlement means it wasn't actually tried in court, right? A judge didn't actually enter a judgment. Instead, you settled out of court. Perhaps you sued first, naturally, but then you settled out of court, and someone in the FBI and in the federal government signed off on this settlement. Why would someone sign off on a settlement of two individuals who were largely responsible for the Russia hoax, which is a fact, by the way? It's an actual fact. And keep in mind that all of this background information I'm giving you is based on John Kennedy's next question to Deputy Secretary Abate, which Abate was not expecting at all, namely about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and who actually at the FBI decided that settling this case made a lot of sense, when in fact, these two individuals literally were engaging in election interference as federal law enforcement officials. So we had that clip from John Kennedy, and it's really incredible because, this deputy secretary had no idea this was coming. He should have, because, of course, John Kennedy is incredibly smart. We have that clip, and here it is.
It was a bullet, Senator. 100%.
Fired by crooks.
Yes, sir.
That hit President Trump in the ear and almost killed him.
100%, Senator.
Okay, glad we cleared that up. I don't want to get off the subject here. Did the FBI just settle two lawsuits, one wholly, one in part, in which the FBI agreed to give Peter Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Lisa Page $800,000?
It's my understanding, Senator, that the Department of Justice was involved in that, not the FBI.
The FBI had nothing to do with it?
There may have been consultation with our general counsel's office, but...
Does the FBI have to sign off on it?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so, but I would want to confirm that.
I would like you to, this would be the same Lisa Page who said to Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" To which Mr. Strzok said, quote, no, he won't. We will stop it. That's the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page I'm talking about. I need to know if the FBI signed off on this lawsuit.
We will get that answer for you, Senator.
And then I need to know who signed off on it. Did you sign off on it?
I absolutely did not and would never sign off on something
Did Chris
like that.
Wray sign off on it, the settlement?
I don't believe he did.
Okay. You don't know what?
Nor do I think he would have.
You need to let me know who signed off on this, if anyone at the FBI. So it was Merrick Garland who agreed to do this, is that right?
Senator, I do not know.
Well, hell,
who
somebody
signed
had
off on
to
that.
agree to it. I've settled a lawsuit before. The client's got to agree to it. You're the client. All
Understood. Right. I'm gonna direct in to the Department of Justice to answer those questions.
Get me that information if you would.
That was awesome. That's Senator John Kennedy basically interrogating the Deputy Secretary of the FBI about the FBI settling a lawsuit from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who together will receive $2 million, combined $2 million, from the federal government because they were allegedly wronged. These are the two individuals who were terminated, let go by the FBI because of the election interference that they were engaged in. And who said crime doesn't pay? I mean, so here's some more background. NBC News. I'm intentionally reading the article to you from NBC News because they're notoriously corrupt. But even NBC News writes, two former FBI officials settled lawsuits with the Justice Department on Friday, that's last Friday, resolving claims that their privacy rights were violated privacy rights were violated when the department leaked to the news text messages that they had sent one another that disparaged former President Donald Trump. It didn't disparage the president. It was about undermining the election itself. The two had sued the Justice Department over a 2017 episode in which officials shared copies with reporters of text messages that they had sent each other, including ones that described Trump as an idiot and a loathsome human, and that called the prospect of a Trump victory terrifying. Strzok, who also investigated former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, was fired after the text messages came to light. Page resigned. They later sued, alleging that department officials leaked the texts to promote a false narrative of anti-Trump bias within the FBI. Folks, there was anti-Trump bias because Peter Strzok was engaged in the actual investigation of the Russia hoax. You know, the same Russia hoax that Donald Trump was a Russian asset. That's what this guy did. That's why he was fired. He wasn't fired over the text, but meanwhile, he decided to sue with Lisa Page, the federal government, because his private texts were released, according to him. Now, I'm not sure whether these texts occurred on his federal government phone or his personal phone, not really sure. But $2 million combined to these individuals, it just shows you that the FBI is corrupt because, as Senator John Kennedy said, you, the FBI, would actually have to have signed off on and agreeing that this settlement was just. Well, why didn't they want it to go to court then, the FBI? I'll tell you why they didn't want it to go to court. Because then there would be discovery. Discovery is when the FBI actually has to provide documents that have been subpoenaed to find out exactly what was said in these conversations. And I can guarantee you a lot worse things were said about the last election. So the fascinating thing about all of this is the FBI thought that no one would notice, that no one would ask any questions, that the country was only focused on the assassination attempt when the FBI came up to the Hill to testify. And instead, John Kennedy completely and utterly destroys a bait, who, by the way, seems like a very nice man. I'm sure he is, but was completely caught off guard. You could tell because he was just like, what? I thought you were going to ask me about the Trump assassination, not about this. It's just incredible. It's amazing. And of course, in Local 3 News, this is another ABC News affiliate, but they're using a CNN story that they picked up and just read. It says former FBI official Peter Strzok and Lisa Page have reached a settlement. And then it also goes into the background, basically saying the same thing, that their private texts of their love affair had been disclosed. But it doesn't touch upon the Russian collusion narrative that Peter Strzok grabbed onto, which was a complete and utter falsity and had proven to be so. So once again, great job, John Kennedy. He basically brought some truth out, and he's asked the FBI to provide a name of whom in the federal government signed off on this settlement. Who said it was okay to pay these two crooks, election interferers, if you will, $2 million of your taxpayer money?